Hi, I'm Brian Van, SportbikeTrackGear.com, and today we're going to do a chain kit install on our STG Yamaha R3, but this one's going to be different. We're going to focus not just on the chain kit install, we're going to focus on some really cool tools that are available from Motion Pro that make this job go a lot smoother. Okay, with this install, we're not focusing so much on just the chain kit itself. We've done that a million times, right? Yeah, this will help the R3 owners, but it's really about the tools right now. A couple of them are new, a couple of them have been around for a while. The new would be the Sprocket Jammer from Motion Pro. This is gonna help prevent the wheel from rotating, and it's gonna allow us to break this nut loose a lot easier than having somebody stand on the rear brake or getting a broomstick, any of that kind of stuff, right? So this is really cool, super cheap, right? When you're all done, you wanna make sure that you've got a straight drive line. You want this rear wheel perfectly centered, okay? We have their alignment tool, right? This has been around for a while, but super bitchin'. Chain tension, I mean, this is like tire pressure. Everybody loves to talk about this stuff. They made this kick-ass little slack setter tool, right? That just helps you find the measurement easier than you normally would. And then to break the chain, rivet the link. We've used one many times, the PBR chain tool. This thing's affordable. We've had great luck with it. I'm actually gonna use the one that I've had for a couple of years now. The thing has been flawless. Beyond that, we've got an EK chain, lots of great chains out there. We've got some Driven sprockets. Okay, steel front, aluminum ring. I'm gonna dress my bike up a little bit, which is kind of cool. And then we have the Driven sprocket nuts for the back. Okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to remove the counter shaft nut. That's before you do anything else, okay? You break the chain first, you're gonna have a hell of a time getting that off. In order to get access to this, we have to remove the counter shaft sprocket cover, which I've done. Very simple. To do that, I also had to pull the shift knuckle off. Very basic things. Now, let's find the appropriate size socket for this, which I've done. Okay, I didn't have the metric equivalent, but I did have 1 1/8", and it fits perfect, right? And that's typically easier to find than the metric one, so 1/2 inch drive there. Now, we need to be able to prevent the rear wheel from rotating, right? So basically hold the chain, right? Hold the wheel so that we can break this loose right here. This sprocket jammer, okay? What I found is, especially stock, brand new, okay? Breaking that nut loose, using this, there's a tremendous amount of flex, right? So I'm gonna recommend you do this a little bit different, okay? We're gonna use this, and I still think this is a great tool, and I will articulate as I go through everything what I really like about it, okay? Remember, this bike comes stock too, right? That is not a 530 chain, so it's not as strong, so it's gonna stretch a little more. So maybe on a 1000cc bike, that would be a little bit more effective. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a combination of that, and you can see that I've obviously been ready for this, right? And I've got my pry bar in place there right now as well. Got the pry bar all wrapped up so it's not gonna scratch my wheel or my swing arm. Get the ratchet moving in the right direction and get tension on everything. And now I'll break that counter shaft nut loose, and you can see from the factory that bad boy was torqued on there. Okay, we don't need the pry bar in there now that the nut has broken loose, okay? Whoever tightened this down on the assembly line, they made damn sure it was not gonna come loose. So once we have this removed, our next step is going to be using the chain tool, the PBR chain tool, to break the stock chain. Okay, to break the chain. I love the way they did this, right? You've got the body of the press itself, and you'll see here the adapter at the bottom, spring-loaded ball bearing, right? So it locks itself in place, pressure in, boom. You'll see there's a B right there, it lines up with brake, so you know that you've got the right adapter at the bottom. From here, you get this up here and line this up with one of the stock rivets on the chain, like so. Just a little bit of tension there. We're going to put the handle on the tool. This aids in stability quite a bit so we can hold it. Finger tight there. Got a 14 wrench. It's important too to keep the threads of the tool itself lubricated. And that's something that we've done off camera. So here, they do recommend you grind these rivet heads down a little bit. I've used the tool multiple times with zero grinding, and it's worked flawlessly. You can see it really does not take a lot of pressure to break that stock rivet head. You're going to want to go ahead and push that through a bit, right? Enough so that when you do the other one, you're able to get the plate off the chain. That should be good there. Let's go ahead and back this all off. We'll give you an idea of what that looks like, right? Really simple. You're just pushing the rivet out, right? Breaking the rivet head off and pushing it out the backside, and then this plate will come off very easily. Back that off. We'll line this one up. Same as we did on the other. Rotate the big screw until it's made contact with the rivet head. Rotate the smaller. Grab the handle. And repeat the same process that we did on the first one. And once you have that broken and through far enough, back it all off, and you can see the plate falls right off. Rivets are pushed out, and from here, we're able to break that factory chain. Go ahead and pull this out. Next up is removal of the rear wheel. Okay, to get the rear wheel off, got a 19 wrench for backup, 22 on the 1/2 inch. Slide your axle bolt. All right, you got your chain adjusters right here too. I'll go ahead and slide the axle bolt out. Support the wheel just a little bit. Makes that a whole lot easier to remove. Okay, I've got the axle out. There's still a nice thin film of grease on here. I might put just a little bit more on. You know, if you don't take your bike apart regularly, most of us don't, right? If you're riding it on the streets, you've been there a long time, put a little film of grease on there. It's just going to ensure that it's not going to seize up as it goes through any of the spacers in the shaft inside the wheel. Now, our Woodcraft stand, check this out, right? I did have to remove the little plastic piece, the rubber piece. Look at all that rear axle. Just slides right over there. Super nice. I'll save the little plug here to the side. So now that's not laying down in the dirt. That's kind of cool. Eric did a nice job on that. We're going to slide the rear brake caliper out of the way. And now we'll be in a position where we can service that rear sprocket. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and get the stock sprocket off. I'm going to loosen each one of the nuts like so. We'll switch to a T-handle now. This is a spot too where you can use an impact if you happen to have it, right? Most probably don't have that, so we'll stick with hand tools today. Another kick-ass Motion Pro tool here. It's that spinner T-handle. One of the things I've always appreciated about Motion Pro is they not only find a way to make really cool, functional, moto-centric tools, they make them look badass. Okay, the sprocket, that stock sprocket, it's really on there pretty snug. Kind of a tight fit over the hub. So, By setting it on the ground like that, the studs are supported, tap it off, right, and then you're good to go. Make sure you have all of the cush drive rubbers in place. Push this back down. And now we're ready for our Driven 520 aluminum rear. Of course, we went with red. That looks sweet on our R3. 42 tooth is what I opted to go with. Fits over a whole hell of a lot nicer than that stock one did. Okay, now it's decision time. We're going to talk about this. This is actually a safety device, okay? You need to decide whether or not you want to put this back on. That is a decision that I am not going to make for you. You need to make that one for yourself. If you choose to put it back on, I'll tell you why it's there. This is a safety device. If you neglect your drivetrain to a point where you have excessive chain slack or the sprocket is just so worn out that the chain comes off, this halo looking device is there to prevent the chain from dipping down, right, if it falls off, and get caught between the sprocket nuts and the swing arm, right? So you need to make a decision on whether or not you want to leave that on there. That is a personal choice. I will not advise one way or the other. I will only make my own decision. And remember, that's coming from the guy who won't wear safety glasses or use a torque wrench. Okay, now, look at this. That's a great compliment to this sprocket, isn't it? These driven sprocket nuts. Go ahead and thread those on. We're going to use our T-handle to just get them run down flush, okay? Before I torque anything, I want to have them all seated nice and evenly. If you prefer to use a torque wrench, you can find that spec online, piece of cake, right? And grab your torque wrench and torque away. Now you got to remember, I've done this for a long time, right? I was a mechanic professionally for a number of years before I started STG, so got a little more feel for torque. So now, all right, we're just going to go ahead and kind of a crisscross pattern here. Okay, now we're going to begin final torque. All right, you want to make sure the cush drive is seated all the way, and we're going to go crisscross here. I'll go a couple of times until I get a good even feel from each one. And then we'll be ready to reinstall the wheel on the bike. Got the rear wheel in place. Right. We're going to begin the process of lifting that up, getting it lined up with that caliper. Right. Push your chain adjuster forward. Grab your axle, slide that through. Once you get that started, it becomes a whole heck of a lot easier because now you've got the axle supporting the weight of the tire. Like so. We are not going to tighten this down right now, okay? That does not happen until we're ready for that final chain adjustment. So basically just get it in place right now. What I am going to do is I'm going to run down the axle nut just enough so we have the tiniest little bit of tension here, okay? Not a lot, just a little. Kind of get everything jammed all the way forward. Put just a little more pressure on it. Want to hold it in place. That right there will be a good start. Okay, now let's install our counter shaft sprocket. You can see very basic here, right? With the R3, we've got a 14 tooth front, okay? The spacing on this, there is no shoulder on this sprocket, right? So you don't have to worry about it. You're able to just essentially install it on the bike. I want the stock tooth count for the front. Slide that over like so. Washer, nut. Now, this nut does not have any type of a locking mechanism on it. Okay, they did have some thread locker in place, and you can still feel the tension from that as I rotate that on here. You could use, right, a little more if you want to. I don't really feel the need to do that, so we're going to skip that. We'll rely on the torque to hold it down firmly in place. Now, the chain. Okay, we have a 120 link chain here. If you're doing a custom chain kit, the chain is going to need to be cut. If you order some of the other chain kits that we do offer, right, the chains will come already cut to size, right? It makes it a little bit easier for you, but if you want to do custom gearing, something like that, you're going to need to do a kit like this. There really isn't an excessive amount of chain lube on this, so I'm not going to clean it off before I install it. Normally, you get a brand new chain, and my experience has been that there is an excessive amount of chain lube on it. I'll typically clean it before I install, but in this case, I don't feel the need to do that. So we'll just go ahead and get everything in place, right? And then I'm going to make my length decisions, right? You don't want to just cut it. You want to get everything mocked up, have the entire chain full length to start with, okay, before you go ahead and cut it, because you don't want to put yourself into a position where you've cut the chain too short. Once you've done that, you're done, man. You're stuck. That is no fun. You need a new chain. Okay, so I start by just mocking this bad boy up like so. Okay, chain length. This is critical, right? You cut this thing, that's the end of it. It's cut, right? There's no putting it back together, getting another rivet link. That's the end of it. So you got to get this right. This is obviously more of a beginner's bike, so I really want to focus on this. This is a critical step. What I've done is I've taken and adjusted the chain adjusters all the way down. I've got the axle all the way forward in the swing arm because I want to find the right place to cut this chain. Here's the things that we need to consider, okay? The way the rivet link works, you've got your right stud that needs to pass through the female portion of the chain. Now, if I were to cut it right here, you can't, right? Because then you have male and female. You're not going to be able to get the rivet link through. So the shortest possible position for me to cut this, right, considering that fact, is right here. You can clearly see now when I cut here, we're going to have female, female, rivet link goes through, we're good to go. So axle is still loose, right? I'm going to pull this bad boy back. Now remember, this is the shortest possible chain length, and there are factors that are involved in this that you need to consider when you're doing it. It's going to be a little bit different depending upon the gearing choice you made. The size of the rear sprocket has an impact on it, right? Size of the front sprocket to some degree is going to influence where you'll be able to cut it. Now, still plenty of slack in that chain. We're more in the middle for sure. It's important as well that when you're doing this, that these are relatively even from side to side, okay? They don't need to be perfectly even right now because we're just mocking this bad boy up, but they need to be relatively even while we go through this process. And from here, it's only going to take just a couple of turns to get all of our chain tension just right. It's going to leave us space to work back as the chain stretches. And at the end of the day, this, in fact, this is the shortest I can make this chain. So that's a right place to cut it. Okay, now, to break the chain, same tool, same setup, right? Pay attention. Right now, do not cut this thing too short. Set it up the same as we did when we broke the stock chain. Get everything in place like so. You know what, take a second look. It's not going to hurt to take a second look to make sure that you've got it over the rivet you actually want to cut. Same tool set up here. And once you broke the first one, right, we're actually going to reposition the chain a little bit. It'll make it easier to break the second one. Same process. And once you break the first one, like so, back the tool off. Finish the other side. When we come back, we're going to be working on the rivet link. Chain is broken. Right now, we're going to go ahead and slide the axle forward. Again, this is just going to be so that we're able to get that rivet link in there easier, okay? Let the sprocket hold all that in place for us. Now, let's get our rivet link. I've already started unpackaging it. I'm going to lubricate the seals, right? Grease here on my hands already. This is my favorite stuff in the world. This is has such a weird consistency, and it is actually kind of hard to get off your hands. Now, really important that we have good lubrication, right, inside the chain. See what I'm doing there? I'm kind of packing that in the holes like that, right? Now, thin film on here. When you push this through, like so, I kind of held my fingers on the backside, thumbs on the front, creates a little pressure, and it forces the grease all around the rivet, and boom, it comes through just like that, okay? Now, we need to lubricate these. That's pretty easy because my hands are nasty right now, all full of chain lube. I'm going to slide these O-rings over, like so. All right, just hold them in place. Now, we have the outer plate that we need to now press over. Little hand pressure is going to hold that in place for us while we get the chain tool ready to press the plate into position. Before you actually compress the rivet, you need to get that plate pressed into position. And of course, they've got us dialed in here too with that. To press this bad boy into position, we're going to adjust the tool once again, like so, okay? Slide that over the back side of the plate. You're going to be working right now only with the big screw, right? I'm not going to use the smaller one. 17mm wrench. Seals are in place. Everything's lubricated. And now we just need to press the outer plate over the rivet and make sure everything's lined up before you really put any torque to this. looks good. You don't want to push this down so far that it over compresses the seals. And I'll show you what I'm talking about right now. We've got another full video where I use the EBR tool, okay? So you can reference that as well. But what I want you to look for is right in here, okay, where we've got the seals. As you begin to compress this down, you get closer and closer and you tighten that gap, you want to make sure that you don't push it in so far that the seal itself is over compressed and it pops out, okay? So feel free to stop and take a look. Once you've got some good movement out of it, double check, and then let's go ahead and continue. There are specs that you can find online that will reference how much the rivet needs to be dimpled, right? How far the plate needs to be pushed over. To be real honest with you, that stuff is pretty vague, okay? Not super easy to find. The reality is most of your bike techs, they're relying on experience when they do this, right? Having done it before, what it needs to look like, what it should feel like, so on and so forth. I'm going to double check the seals, make sure everything looks good. I've got plenty of rivet hanging out now so that I'm able to stake it down. We'll get the tool ready for that. Once again, focusing on the body of the tool and then the engraving on this. You want to get the R right up against a rivet. And they did a good job. This thing is really cool. This is what we're going to use to stake that down. A little bit of lubrication over the top of that is good. A little on the back side here as well. Not going to hurt either. You can use a little bit of your chain lube there. Just going to allow it to rotate easier and not gall itself up. You do one at a time. The adapter in the back will drop right over the rivet, and here in the front, that centers itself right in that rivet head. Now, hold the tool, get your 17 wrench, this definitely takes some pressure. What I'll do here is I'll do this in stages, right? You don't want to go crazy on it right out of the gate. Take your time. Do each one a couple times. If you have a micrometer, you find the measurements online, you'll definitely want to do this in stages as you see the head of the rivet grow each time you rotate the tool. When I come back, we'll show you what the finished product looks like. Okay, I'm just finishing the rivet link up now, and you'll notice I move the position of the tool. This is where, when I'm riveting the link, I prefer to do it visually up here where we started. That was just a better place to begin so you could clearly see what I was doing. But to finish it off and to be in a good position where you've got nice mechanical advantage down here like this, left hand on the tool, right hand on the wrench, and you see I'm small moves here, right? Then back off, inspect. I'm gonna do this other one more time. And then we'll check our work and make sure that the link has been installed correctly and that we haven't damaged the seals and that we've got it staked down enough. We don't have to worry about the plate popping off. When you're doing a chain kit, if it's the first time you've staked a rivet, it's not a bad idea to buy a spare rivet link. right? Having that spare link when you're installing it can be the difference between getting your installation done where you want to, or waiting for another one to get shipped to you. Got that compressed nicely, right? I'm gonna check the chain for binding. Nope. Rotates fine, which is good. It's not over compressed. I have no seals popping out, so we are good to go there. Now we gotta come up front, right? And we've gotta get this tightened down, okay? I don't want to do anything chain tension wise until I've got this nut holding the countershaft sprocket against the countershaft itself. This is a spot where this should work flawlessly, right? Like so. We're going to get our ratchet and run this down. Okay, we don't have a lot of chain tension right now, so I just want to get that seated, okay? And in my opinion, the best use for this tool, right, it's useful here for sure. I think that when you're trying to get your chain alignment in place and really draw that axle against the adjuster blocks, I think that's where this is going to come in and be really handy. I'm going to clean some of the excessive lube off the chain. And then we're going to focus on that initial chain adjustment and rear axle alignment. You don't want to take that first ride with so much chain lube on it that it's just flying everywhere, okay? With that said as well, you don't want to clean it so that the chain is completely dry and you damage any of the drivetrain pieces that you just installed. So now, let's begin to get the axle even so we can adjust the chain tension. Okay, chain tension time, right? We've got everything installed, link is riveted, I've wiped off the excess grease. We've got this not fully torqued, but it's seated right now, everything's flush. Between 35 and 45 millimeters of chain slack is where you want to begin. Start here and you'll see the alignment marks, right? Inside here, there's some up in the front, there's some in the rear. You want to eyeball it and get it even from side to side and find a reasonable, right, amount of chain tension. That's probably still a little bit, right, to the loose side. So move equally, right? Just a little bit now. Okay, we're getting a lot closer. Now, here's where we're going to use the Sprocket Jammer, right? I think this is where this tool is really going to shine right now. Super important that you are able to have the axle firmly against the adjuster block. So I'm going to rotate it back a couple of times, smack it, make sure everything's seated nicely. Okay? Go ahead and snug the axle. Like so. Okay, gear jammer out. Rotate it around a little bit. That still looks to the loose side. Now here's where we're going to use this super cool slack setter tool, right? We're going to pick a nice center point here in the swing arm. Tool goes over, push up, make sure that's seated. Now hold that in place, push down, and we are over 40 millimeters. You know, I don't want to start at the top end of the scale with a brand new chain. You know this thing's going to stretch. So let's loosen up the axle just a little bit. It's not a final torque setting yet, so I'm not using a backup wrench, okay? Small moves once again. Equal side to side. Feel it by hand. Come back at it with the slack setter tool, right? You want to try and pick that same spot on the swing arm. About 10 pounds of pressure, right? Every bike's going to be a little bit different. Google the specs, you'll find them real easy. Hold this in place. And we are now just over 35. I like that. I think that's going to be a good starting point, okay? We're not totally done because we don't have everything snugged up, and we don't know if the axle is perfectly straight. So what we're going to do here, put our gear jammer in again, make sure the axle is against those blocks. I'm going to snug it now. I want to focus on actual alignment. The marks that are on this, okay, that are on this swing arm, on these chain adjusters, they are not phenomenal. That's where this comes in handy. At the end of the day, when you're done, what you want to have happen here, okay, is you need that rear wheel running true. That reduces the amount of friction and resistance. Also keeps the motorcycle riding in a straight line when you're on the throttle. So, seat that nicely, and essentially what you're going to do is eyeball it from the front to the back against the line in the chain, okay? And this is going to give you an idea of the relationship between the chain and the rear sprocket itself, okay? That is super close right there. I'm going to take a look at my adjustment marks. And make sure they are relatively even, which they are. I'm going to come back up here, and I really want to focus on this right now. I like that. That looks really true right there, okay? Go ahead and take this off. Do not rotate the wheel with this on there, you'll destroy it. We're going to come back to the gear jammer. Okay. And get more torque on the axle before we tighten our chain adjusters. Use a torque wrench here if you're not comfortable without having that exact measurement. Now, you want to use 2 wrenches here to tighten the jam nut. What you don't want to do is change the position, right, of the chain adjuster. So you make sure that's relatively snug, which it is, because you want this held firmly in place, okay? So make sure that's snug. That feels really good right there. Okay, now hold that wrench. And tighten the jam nut against the adjustment nut, like so. Same thing here. That feels good. Get your jam nut tight, like so. Okay, last thing we want to do is double check that chain tension. It's running true, everything's tight. We are going to torque this a little more, but our axle's tight, our chain adjusters are tight. Find that same spot I've been working with here on the swing arm, right? Let's go ahead and make sure you're holding that tool nice and square against the chain, like so. You want to push up. It's about 10 pounds of pressure. You want to make sure the sleeve is seated against the base of the tool. And now, about 10 pounds of pressure down. And you can see we are right there at that opening adjustment, about 35, 36 mils, okay? It's 35 to 45, brand new chain for sure gonna stretch, okay? So you wanna be more at that entry part of it, right? The beginning of the scale, not the end, because it's gonna stretch absolutely when you ride it. You're gonna wanna recheck it after your first couple of rides, maybe even after your first ride, to see how much it's moved. Now, let's verify everything is tight here in the back. Chain adjusters, axle. That feels great. Very important, like I told you too, with the chain adjusters, okay? Backup wrench all good and tight. Especially in my case here, I opted to take that safety device off. So if this chain pops off, right, it's gonna get jammed up in here. It's not going to be cool. So now it's time to torque the counter shaft nut down. Once again, I think the gear jammer, it's a cool tool, I dig it, no doubt about it, it's useful. I don't think it is substantial enough, right? Or it's the only thing that I would use to get good torque on my counter shaft. So what I'm gonna do here is, I'm gonna go old school again, right? I'm gonna go ahead and slide this through my swing arm, like so. You can use a torque wrench here. I mean, these definitely require a solid amount of torque, and just the stretch that I felt using the gear jammer, I feel that's more appropriate for chain adjustments and jamming the actual axle against the adjuster blocks than it is going to be for torquing this down. Now, final steps are, counter shaft cover needs to be reinstalled. I gotta get this back in place. We'll go double check everything, and then we'll take the motorcycle for its first road test. Chain kit installation. You can see these tools that we added, they definitely make the job go easier. It's gonna get you a better finished result. I suggest definitely picking up minimally, right, with a chain kit. Let's get the PBR tool. You have to be able to rivet the link. You can do this without the tool, but the tool is really cool. You're gonna get a nicer end result. That axle alignment, this thing is key. They do a really nice job with this piece. Having that up there, make sure you have that axle run true, because remember, these marks are not always perfect, okay? This is gonna help with reducing driveline friction, right? More power, more speed, better handling from a little tool like that. The gear jammer, I think it's cool. I dig it. I'm gonna keep it for sure. Tire changes, chain adjustments, that kind of stuff. Is it perfect for breaking a counter shaft nut loose? I would say probably not. Not in my opinion. I think there's different ways to do that, and I'm gonna stick with those. So, there you have it. I'm Brian Van, sportbiketrackgear.com. This is our chain kit install on our 2015 STG Yamaha R3.